would have turned. There's your sense of self-preservation.
Resident Evil 3 came out about a month ago, which has given me time to chew it over. There has been a bit of a mix between good and bad reviews, many of which citing the game's incredibly short length and full-priced value at $60 as the main reason for this. So today, we're going to take a look at the game from a technical standpoint and give the game a buy or not buy rating. There is a few things we're going to be looking at, such as the controls, graphics, ambiance, and sounds, and then finally the replayability. And remember, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell for notifications so that I know you guys enjoyed it. The controls for this game are more solid, opting for a third-person over-the-shoulder experience, much like the remake of number 2 did, but with an added dodge mechanic that oftentimes felt non-responsive, and more often throwing the player into the danger rather than taking them out of the danger. Many of the original Resident Evil games were very puzzle-heavy in orientation. This was a letdown in that aspect, as a lot of the puzzles were removed, and even though the game had received a good facelift, it was thrown more into an action orientation rather than horror, which for me, as a fan of the series, it left something to be desired. The game does have a very nice palette of sounds that it pulls from running water to the weaponry. The weaponry itself, while lacking a nice variety, there is a variety of sounds that go with them. A shotgun sounds like a shotgun, the handgun sounds like a handgun. The zombies, they have this moany, almost dead-like gasping for air. The dogs themselves have a nice sound. They look awful, but they do have a nice sound to them. Overall, the sound quality of this game is pretty spot on. There are a few points where the dialogue just barely does not match the lip movements.
Special Tactics and Rescue Service. Her name is something Valentine.
It's Jill.
The game's soundtrack is probably the most disconcerting soundtrack I've heard. It has an almost cinematic feel. Kind of reminded me of the movies to a point, and oftentimes it felt that the music was too relaxed for what was happening on the screen. There was a few boss fights, however, and it felt pretty nice. But overall, it gave the game more of a somber tone rather than a horror-like game. It kind of took me back to Resident Evil, the movie, over any of the actual Resident Evil games. And for me, that was kind of a put-off. Don't get me wrong, I loved the movies. It did not match the style of gameplay and level of gameplay, rather, that this game was trying to create. Much like the original Nemesis game that came out in 1999, this game takes you back through some of the more iconic locations of Resident Evil 2's remake. Now, that said, they were able to share the assets from one game to another, which sped up production considerably, instead of having to remake all of the props or remake the locations. All they had to do was add a little bit of differentiation to it. Resident Evil 3's remake kept much of the original game story with a new added introduction sequence, which was a nice little touch. Gave the player a little bit of a interaction and movement tutorial, which you rarely see in games nowadays, or at least done in that way. The game itself only features one story, with very little chance of there being any more added into it later. There are multiple difficulties, with the higher difficulties of Nightmare and Inferno, changing the locations of items and enemies, adding more enemies, making the game a little bit more difficult and, you know, randomized. But replaying the game can become a bit tedious and taxing. Even with the rewards and unlockables that you can get for completing achievements and in-game challenges, it only adds a really slight replayability, as they are more like a cherry on top of an ice cream. It's nice, but not really necessary or needed, really. Personally, I would have liked to see additional characters added to the game, maybe some additional game modes, maybe some better unlockable weapons. I mean, the infinite rocket launcher, that's nice, but it doesn't really add much to the replayability. It just makes the game more time-consuming. My final thoughts. At the beginning of this video, as a Resident Evil fan, I came into this video expecting that I would be defending it and saying that it's well worth the buy. The truth is that even though that's kinda how I feel, after reviewing my notes and really my minor complaints about it, the game kinda left me at a point where I would say buying the game, especially at full price, is not something I would highly recommend unless you are a complete nutjob fan of the series, much like I am. It's a great one-off, really only worth one time playing through it, especially since there's no real variation to the game after that point. Definitely play it on the hardest difficulty you think you can handle. Definitely, and it is, if you're like me and you collect the game, it is well worth it. It's a fun experience, but it's a one-time deal. After that first playthrough, even after your second playthrough, if you decide that you want to try to get a faster time or go for that S rank, it's not really worth the $60. It really should have been more of a DLC for Resident Evil 2, and they should have remade a fuller game like Code Veronica. Just in my opinion, this game, while it's fun, it has almost no replayability, and even if you're a nutcase like me and you've replayed it 10 times on various difficulties trying to get an S rank across the board, it's still one of those things where, honestly, I would say don't buy it, at least not at full price. I would wait for it to go on sale, or I would wait and see if any additional content actually comes out for this, because at this current point in time, the only redeeming feature may be the resistance mode, or Resistance game that came out with this, but since I'm not a Dead by Daylight's type person, didn't really sit well with me. So that's my opinion. I would definitely say if you're a huge fan of the series like I am, well worth the buy. You probably already bought it. If you're not, I would say either wait for it to go on sale or wait for there to be more content actually added to the game. Thank you all for watching. Have a great day.